There will be no leftovers this year. After a Black Friday riot ends in tragedy, a mysterious Thanksgiving-inspired killer terrorizes Plymouth, Massachusetts, the birthplace of the infamous holiday. You know when a movie knows exactly what it is and totally understands the assignment? I think about *Malignant* or *The Return of the Living Dead*, films that dive headlong and without reserve into the campiness and extremes of whatever particular genre they're in. Eli Roth's *Thanksgiving* absolutely fits this bill. So on Thanksgiving, this deadly door-busting riot breaks out at a local store, and the following year, a dude dressed as a pilgrim with a pilgrim mask on begins a reign of terror that results in wonderful slasher gore. Now, the first portion of this is extremely tense, but also played up heavily for laughs, and not in a cheesy way. Because this is taking place in Massachusetts, and Roth is from that state, he takes full advantage of poking a bit of fun at some of the stereotypes. Now, if you ever saw that Super Bowl Hyundai commercial that had John Krasinski, Ben Affleck, Chris Evans, and Rachel Dratch, and they heavily played up the attitude and accents, that's what we get in the first act of the film, except it's on steroids and multiplied by like 1,000. What starts out as a tense and angry crowd gathering impatiently erupts into full-blown chaos. And while I was laughing incredulously at the antics, it also is kind of representative of how some of the Black Friday shenanigans that have happened in the past. Once the pandemonium is over and the dust settles, the story then takes us forward a year. And this is when mystery and suspense begin to creep in as a couple of the participants in the previous year's riot are massacred in very satisfying ways. Now, I want to say there's a lot of misdirection at who the killer might be, but after the opening scene, I think it's pretty obvious at who is harvesting people for Thanksgiving. And while this may bum some people out, I was less concerned about the intrigue and more engrossed in how the next victim was going to meet their end. There's some very abrupt and creative kills here, and the camera, it just doesn't even flinch when showing the brutality. I mean, this is a gruesome and gory slasher with blood, guts, barf, and squirms. It only takes an hour and 47 minutes, and the story moves quickly along with very little downtime. The progression, it also feels a lot like a Scream movie, not only with the successive killings, but the humor and the plot lines also could spark some minor similarities. And really, don't go reading into that to try and figure out who I'm referring to, because I'm not referring to any specific character or even plot device. But once you see the movie, you can see the parallels in the storytelling. I loved how despite having a bunch of vapid and self-absorbed high schoolers as the central figures, I was still very much engrossed in what was happening to them. Not that I was extremely bummed when a few of them got a gnarly surprise, but there were a couple that had charisma, and they made me root for them. And we don't get a bunch of character development on anybody in this story, but we do get enough so that if you haven't guessed the killer, there are a few viable options to choose from, each with a plausible motive and a sketchy enough presence to harbor a guess in their direction. Now, I know it's not really billed as a comedy, but this movie's freaking hilarious. And maybe that says something about me, but at least on the audience that I saw this with, we were all laughing in the same parts, so we might all be the same level of damaged. Now, I really appreciate that so many of the kills are just unexpected. They suddenly happen, creating gasps and groans, but all in appreciation. And even though I greatly dislike jump scares, there are a bunch in this, and surprisingly, most of them work. There are even the musical stingers to accentuate the actions, but cleverly, they don't always appear at the moment you're going to think they do. I mean, yeah, the jumps are still present, they're just delayed or pushed until we let our guard down. As I'd mentioned earlier, to understand the assignment of this story, there has to be an acknowledgement of a certain level of cheese that makes its way into the narrative. There are some ridiculous setups for characters, and some moments when lines of dialogue are just utterly cringy. But they all fit together to craft an exciting watch. Now for me, this is going to be a yearly watch. It's an instant holiday classic, surprising me thoroughly at how much I really did enjoy it. Now, I don't think all of the misdirection works, and if you don't like campy gore-fests, you probably won't have nearly as much fun as I did. There's also a lot of plot armor and character protection, where certain players aren't eliminated immediately so that then they can escape or maybe cause some hardship for the villain. And these inconsistent actions by the killer could be cause for annoyance. But without them, the movie would lack some of the goofy antics, some of the cat and mouse chase sequences, and then wonderful villain monologues that all help to elevate this from just another random slasher movie to one that's remarkably satisfying. So overall, Thanksgiving leans heavily on its premise to deliver ruthlessly gruesome attacks while interweaving a mystery into the story. While the narrative does resemble other slashers that have come before it, the brutality and abruptness at which the kills happen, combined with exaggerated Massachusetts characters, help to create laughs along with the squirms. There is a lot of plot protection to allow events to occur, but these don't detract from the savagery of the actions and the thrills that are produced. And while some of the sequences are ridiculous, this isn't for the squeamish, and it delivers exactly what it promises. There's no sex, some brief nudity, a ton of profanity, and a massive amount of barbaric violence. I give Thanksgiving 4.5 out of 5 couches. So have you seen this one yet? I'd love to hear what you thought of the movie once you see it. Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.